Good afternoon to everyone here, and good morning to our Western Australian counterparts, and welcome to part 2 of our timetabling webinars. I'm Rowan, and with me here is my team member Sharissa, as usual.
Hi everyone.
Excellent. And today we're going to be taking you through how to set up rolling enrollments within aXcelerate, which is a very common feature used amongst Cricos and Ellicos colleges, but can be useful for anyone with standard domestic students as well. Now, I understand that most of you are probably already aXcelerate clients, while some of you may not be using the system right now. Hopefully this will be a nice introduction for how you can make use of it in your business or current aXcelerate environment. We've also received a few of your questions come through via the sign-up page initially. As usual, we respond to those via a follow-up email after the session. Additionally, if you have any comments you leave in the chat, the stream today, we'll also be including those in those answers. So let's get right into it and start off by revisiting what exactly rolling enrollments are. So a rolling enrollment is probably best illustrated with an example. So let's say you have a qualification that goes and lasts a year, but it's divided up into 4 terms of study. Now, in a standard enrollment situation, you would have a student who starts in term 1 before progressing through to terms 2, 3, and 4 accordingly. In a rolling enrollment case, you would have a student that could start at any one of those terms and progress onwards. So for example, if you had a student who started in term 2, they would go on to complete terms 3 and 4, but when they get to the end of that, they've missed term 1. So they would roll over into the next year when term 1 starts again and finish off there. In a similar vein, if a student starts in term 3, they will progress through the order of terms 3, then 4, then again roll over and complete terms 1 and 2 in the next year. So within aXcelerate, if you try and set things up so that you have what we call a class for each one of these terms or intakes, you'll actually start to run into a bit of a problem. So in this example we have on the screen here, you can see we have 2 classes, class 1 and 2, and they actually somewhat overlap. You have class 1 starting in January, then it continues through units 1, 2, 3, and 4. And then you have class 2, which begins in February, starting on unit 2, and goes on to unit 3, 4 before going back to 1. This is actually not the correct setup because we have the classes overlapping each other. The reason this is a problem is because if you timetable these classes, something we looked at in our last session, part 1, what the system will do, it will create sessions for each individual class. So you'll have one set of sessions under class 1 and another set under class 2. Now, because they overlap, that means you'll actually get 2 different sessions for unit 2. So you won't be able to have students from class 1 and 2 sit together in the same room. In fact, they'll actually clash and the system will complain that you're using the same trainer and rooms when you're running your timetabling. So in order to set this up correctly in aXcelerate, it needs to look more like this. In this example, we have class 1 running through units 1, 2, 3, and 4 through those first couple of months of the year. And in class 2, it starts immediately afterwards in May, starting again on units 1, 2, 3, and 4. So the classes are, sort of bookended or consecutive. The reason this works is because if we enroll a student in, say, unit 3 or 2 in class 1, we'll be able to roll them over into class 2. So our classes are not our intake points. The intake points are actually on the units or the timetable you are building. It's going to be a little hard to see it first, but hopefully through the examples today and seeing it in action, it'll be a bit clearer how our system works compared to what might be initially intuitive. Now, to make sure this can function correctly, you have to keep 2 key criteria in mind during this process. First and foremost, the classes, their start and end dates, they must be back-to-back or consecutive. So when one class stops, the next one has to start. They cannot crossover in any way, otherwise that will simply make the feature non-workable. Similarly, you'll also need to make sure that both classes, all the current ones and the future ones you may be making, are fully scheduled and timetabled. If you skip over that part, you leave your future ones not fully timetabled, that will make it really hard for the rolling enrollments feature to work for you. So keep those 2 things in mind: consecutive classes, fully timetabled, and that'll give you the keys to getting your rolling enrollments functioning. As a sort of side note, I will point out that the features we're looking at today are all behind what we call a subsection called Ellicos timetabling, and you'll actually need this feature turned on in order to access the rolling enrollment tools. This is the case even if you don't actually have Ellicos courses. If you're just regular Cricos or even domestic, you'll still need what we call Ellicos timetabling on to access these features. So If after today's session you begin hunting in your account and you're finding that certain buttons aren't appearing, you can just get in touch with us to have it turned on. It comes at no additional charge, it's fully free, but you may need to contact support just to have those activated in your specific account. Now, in part 1 of our timetabling webinars, for the people there, we went through the process of creating, scheduling, and timetabling classes, all that full process. We're going to sort of jump off that point where we were last time, and we're going to look at duplicating and quickly creating a second class, but also making sure that we timetable it so that the rolling enrollments feature will work accordingly. So I'm going to jump into here. Oops, sorry, my mistake. Overlay. There we go. All right. So we're in aXcelerate now, and what we're going to do is jump into our classes section. And you can see we have the classes here that we were working with previously. We've already got one for 2021 and 2022. These are all fully timetabled. And we're going to go ahead and create another one for 2023. And we're going to do that by duplicating this class. Oops, let's go back. Let's hit that duplicate button a bit further to the right. There we go. And we're going to rename this because this class is going to be for the 2023 commencements, like so. We'll give it an appropriate start date. This one is due to commence on the 9th of February 2023, like so, and the end date's updating accordingly. Now, in our last session when we did this, we also ticked this linked timetable button. What that does, it will try and copy not only the scheduling of all your units, but also create a whole new set of workshops to fully timetable it. The issue with doing that in this case is we're looking to have rolling enrollments, and that means that students can have workshops from several different classes. If you copy the timetable like this, it can have unintended effects depending on what you've named those workshops. One easy thing you can do is you can put the class name into the workshop names. And that can be a problem if you're copying it because those names will not strictly update. So if our 2022 class has a bunch of workshops with the year 2022 in their name, if we create this and copy the timetable, it means all the workshops for 2023 will still say the previous year. They'll have the correct dates, but the name won't match that. So if you're setting up classes for rolling enrollments, what we advise doing is to actually not tick this option. Feel free to duplicate the classes. It's just best to not include the linked timetable in these situations. So we'll leave that unticked and our dates here before hitting submit to create that. There's our new duplicated class in the system here. And if we click the edit pen against that class, we can look down and see that it has a set of units like we covered in our prior webinar, and they've all got the correct patterned dates like so. However, it does lack any workshops, so that indicates that this is a scheduled class, but it is not timetabled. Remember that our requirement, part 2 requirements, second one of that was to make sure that all classes are indeed fully timetabled. So we're going to quickly run through that again. Before we do, one thing we want to adjust is towards the end, you may, in your situation, have what we call term breaks. So maybe students will sort of pause study here, have a month or so off, and then resume study onto the other units. It's a bit of a gap, and that's not reflected in this set here. We can put that in before we timetable it. So let's go to our timetable button over here. And like we covered in the previous webinar, to adjust the schedule, the simple dates of the units, you need to go over to this simple view here. This is the units with their dates. That's copied across when we duplicated it. We're going to put a term break after June here. So we have it ending like so. The next unit is due to start immediately afterwards. We're going to put a month between this and the end. So I'm going to go ahead, or a week in this case. So let's say that instead of starting on this Tuesday, we'll jump ahead and commence it a bit in the middle of July. We'll then adjust the end here because that's 2 days to do a unit. We'll adjust that to be a bit more accurate. So let's push that out to the 21st like so. And now there's a gap between the end of this unit and the start of this one. We want this same pattern to continue for the remaining units. So I'm going to click this clock icon and it'll push that pattern down. So this unit will start immediately after the previous one, but before it, this one has a bit of a gap. So we've now got a term break just in here. Once you've adjusted your dates, you can hit update schedule. It will lock those in. And if we go back to the class, we can see that that date is reflected in here. That's all from the scheduling, what we covered in our previous session. So just be aware you can adjust this after duplicating if you want to adjust the dates of your eventual timetable. Now we're going to go ahead and make those units up. Since we copied without a linked timetable, it means we will have to timetable out the units. You can see none of them have workshops, all the dates are simply proposed. So we'll go ahead and start doing so. Let's check our first unit and go create timetable. And we're brought to this screen again that we saw in our previous webinar. First, need to choose the session name. To keep things simple, we're just going to choose the unit of competency code this time around. And last time, we also talked about this option in here. So this is designed for, let's say you have, a face-to-face session running for about a week. That's what you would timetable in. But the unit itself may actually go for a bit longer if maybe they're spending time doing assessments. In that last webinar, we mentioned you can untick this to desynchronize those. You can have the workshop run shorter than the unit dates, for example. Unfortunately, if you're setting up classes for rolling enrollments, you'll have to leave this on pretty much at all times. You'll be able to adjust dates once you've enrolled students, but in this setup stage, it's best to leave these in place, otherwise the rolling features will not work correctly. With that set, we can then go to the actual timetabling section, and we're just going to load in a pattern as we've got a few previously saved here. That's been done, so between these days will be scheduled out and timetabled. When we hit submit, it will give us that preview, and we can see everything is green. There are no clashes, every single day is valid to be timetabled. So we'll go ahead and confirm that date. All right, and that's our first unit timetabled. Again, if you were there for part 1 of our webinar, you would recall that we then sort of just go through and do that for every single unit. However, in this case, we have that ELICOS timetabling feature turned on I mentioned before, which is allowing us to use this as well. So what this feature does, it will let you apply this pattern to every single unit or any unit of your selection based upon these proposed dates. The reason it's appearing here is because we've timetabled our first unit with this pattern. So in order to get it, you will need to timetable at least one unit manually, but for the rest, you can actually have the system automatically apply this to every unit. So firstly, we're going to tick the units that we want this pattern against, in this case, all of them. And then we want to choose the apply button. And as you can see, it gives you a hint of what days it's going to be using as per the pattern. Again, we have to choose session names. In this case, we're going to do unit of competency code as selected. That means every workshop will just use the name of the unit against it, which is what we want in this case. And then we're going to hit apply all, and it will try and push that pattern against every unit and timetable it away. Give us a warning before proceeding, and upon confirming, it will run through and start timetabling those out one at a time. We've got a bunch of green ticks, that means this has worked. This will not work if there are any clashes detected at all. What will happen is you'll get a little warning error here. The system will then move on and try and do it on the next unit. So this may only partially work. If you get any clash warnings like that, you'll probably have to go in and just manually timetable that to work around the conflicts. However, if there aren't any problems, the system will just do it for you. And now that that's finished, we can hit refresh this page, and it's all been done. Every unit is now timetabled according to that pattern. So as you can see, although when duplicating your classes, you may not be able to copy the timetable, with this feature, you can rapidly build up a timetable. So that's always an option if you need a bit more speed when creating your future schedules. All right, so we've now fulfilled the criteria for rolling enrollments. We have one class here, all fully dated out and fully timetabled. And we also have a future class, which we can roll students into. Note that it starts after this one ends. These classes do not overlap in any way. If they did, we would run into problems. And they have both been fully timetabled. We're in that criteria, and now we can look at how you actually start rolling students into these.
All right, everyone. So now that you've got your classes fully timetabled and scheduled back to back with no overlaps, I'm going to show you how to perform a rolling enrollment and see how everything ties into place. Now, if you do have any questions in the meantime or throughout the webinar, please feel free to pop them in the chat room or even to say hello to us. Okay, so to start off, what we want to do is to demonstrate a rolling enrollment. So as Rowan explained earlier, that means that a student may start at any point within the course itself. So I'm going to just click into the class update area just to demonstrate the dates. So we're going to look at some dates. I'm going to pop a student into the 3rd unit. So that starts on the 1st of March 2022. All right, so let's go back to the class and click the enroll button. So I'm going to pop a student called Gordon. So Lucky Gordon's going to be our rolling enrollment student. Okay. Now, very importantly, you must enroll the student as tentative. This is a very crucial step. If you miss the tentative checkbox, the rolling enrollments feature will not work. And in line with the Cryoclass processes, you would want to enroll the student as tentative anyway, because you've got to send a letter of offer to them and wait for them to return the signed letter and or pay their deposit before confirming their enrollment. So let's go ahead and enroll Gordon as tentative. Now you'll see that Gordon now has been tentatively enrolled. So to go into his enrollment, you can either click on View Enrollment or simply use the filter. When I use the filter, you'll see that Gordon's been given a place in the class. However, none of the units have been enrolled. So he's just been given this spot in the class. Let's click into his name. And let's start off by changing his commencement date to the 1st of the 3rd, 2022. All right. If you're not too sure of his expected completion date at this point, you can use this little blue calendar icon here as a tooltip. It's actually a date calculator. So when you click on it, you can type in the duration of the entire qualification, which in this case is about 52 weeks. So I'm just going to change this to weeks and go done. You will see that aXcelerate's popped in the formula in here. However, I still want to click into it and make sure it finishes on the same day as or the expected end date, because it finishes on a Tuesday and it starts on a Tuesday as well. So if your course starts on Monday and you want to finish on a Sunday, you will simply adjust the dates to the day before. All right, so at this stage, once these dates are locked in and confirmed, update the enrollment. Okay, so back to this page, it is very important to note here that the start date of the student's enrollment must match the start date of the unit, which is what I've done in this case. All right, so once Gordon's returned his signed letter of offer, paid his deposit, and you're happy to confirm his place in the class, what you want to do is to click on this green button over here, Confirm Enrollment and Schedule. As Rowan had mentioned earlier, if you do not see this green button, that's because this particular flag has not been turned on in your account, and all you have to do is to contact our customer support team to turn this flag on. So I'm going to go ahead and click on the green button, and you'll see that it started putting the dates in. Now note that all these units still contain the original unit start and end dates, and that you will see there's this rollover button over here. Now watch what happens when I mouse over this button. All right, so there are a couple of units with the green boxes highlighted. So that's aXcelerate's way of telling you that these 2 units have passed, they have elapsed, and the system's going to try and look for future dated units of the same type and roll Gordon over to these units. So I'm actually going to click into this to start the rolling enrollment process. It's going to ask me to select a class. Because I've already timetabled a class in the future, I'm going to say yes, look for these units in this class which the student has missed. Click done. Okay, so automatically you will see that now the 2 units that Gordon has missed, which is ADM 502 and ADM 503, are now starting or have been scheduled in the 2023 year. And Gordon will start with the 3rd unit. Simply scroll down and confirm enrollment.
If you don't see any of those buttons, like the rollover button, or there are no classes to choose from, the main reason that would happen is that you haven't done the setup correctly. So if your classes overlap or you have not fully timetabled them out, you won't get any real notification. You simply will not see the rollover button. So make sure that the Ellicos timetabling feature is turned on, but if it is, also double check your classes to make sure they meet those two criteria of non-overlapping and being fully timetabled.
That's right. Okay, so on this page, aXcelerate will just by default pop the students into these sessions. You don't have to do anything at this stage and just leave it as default. Do also note that we want to leave this checkbox as ticked off. It's a quick reminder, these will allow the units to take on the rolled over unit start and end dates. So remember, never uncheck this box, otherwise it's going to break all your unit start and end dates. There is no way to perform a rollover without checking this sync box. All right, so let's go ahead and add units of competency and create bookings. All right, so now we're at the invoicing page, but I'm going to skip this at this point and simply go back to view Gordon's enrollment summary. Okay. So at this point, once you've done that, I'm going to show you how to review the student's enrollment. So back to Gordon's page, once you have successfully enrolled the student into a rolling enrollment method, you will see that they will be sitting in the same class, in this one class, containing the date they commenced on. However, some of the workshops or sessions against the units will have dates indicating that they are attending the sessions well into the future. If at this point the unit dates are different from the session dates, you can adjust this for the student. So you can see that the Gordon's taken on the session start and end dates against the units. You may have a practice internally in your RTO which says that there is, 1 or 2 weeks marking period and the unit doesn't end on the same day as the session date. So at this point, you can go ahead and set all units of competency, click on this button and bulk set the end dates or the start dates at this stage. All right. Okay, so and Gordon's been enrolled into these sessions. So that's pretty much in a nutshell how you'd perform a rolling enrollment, and that's how everything comes into place together with the back-to-back class setup. Now I'm going to go back into the classes page and I'm going to show you what happens when I enroll a student into the 2023 class and see how all the sessions come together. So I'm going to click into the second class. I'm going to quickly enroll a student called Rolf. That's a tentative student. Now Rolf is not a rolling enrollment. He is in fact starting exactly at Unit 1 of this particular course. So I'll just update the enrollment to lock in his dates and quickly confirm his enrollment and schedule. So I'm simply putting him into the very first unit without any different start or end dates. You will notice this time that the rollover button is missing, and that's because aXcelerate has identified that there is in fact nothing to roll over. The student is in fact starting on the scheduled date of the class and all the units are in place. So it's according to schedule, there's nothing to roll over. Simply scroll down and confirm enrollment. Once again, we're back to this invoicing page, so we're going to simply submit to view the enrollment summary. So looking at Rolf's enrollment, okay, he's been again popped into these workshops or sessions, but I'm going to click into this particular unit to demonstrate the next part. As I scroll down, you will see that there are actually two students. We've got Gordon, who is the rolling enrollment student, and Rolf, who is the student that I've just enrolled. So this is a great example of how these two students have been booked into the same workshops or sessions where there's a crossover, and how rolling enrollments work by booking students in different intakes into the same session within the same unit.
Awesome. So that's our rolling enrollments process. We're going to finish up today by just looking at a small thing to do with workshop types that can very easily be remedied with rolling enrollments tools. So I'm just going to go back into aXcelerate, And staying on this combined workshop, we have students from 2 different classes sitting in here in the same workshop. And you may notice about this session that this option here, the minimum maximum participants, has gone to 1 and 99. Now, you can adjust this at any point. You simply go to the workshop and update it, and then you can adjust these figures. However, that can be quite intensive if you are timetabling a lot of units. So if you don't care particularly much about your class allocations, it doesn't really matter how many people are in any given room or what have you, you already know that. You may not need to interact with this. The minimum maximum may just not be very relevant. However, if you are keeping close track of that, it may get quite tedious to go in and update every timetable workshop and constantly change the max value to get it lower than 99. Thankfully, we've got a way to get around this so that any future timetable classes will actually have a different maximum value. The way to do this is we need to go back to something called workshop types. So when you were timetabling the class, I'm just going to jump into that right now. It's been creating workshops against every unit, and in the background, aXcelerate's actually been creating workshop types to support all those sessions. We can get to them in the workshop types area, and from there, we'll actually be able to change that default participant number. So let's go to our workshop types. And you'll see initially that there's really not much here. The reason that occurs is because by default, the system does not show any timetabled workshop types. We have to include them with this button here. So I'm going to go ahead and click that. And again, not much has actually changed on the list, and that's because as well as being hidden with this button, most of those workshop types are also going to be inactive. So if I click this and then move to the inactive tab, we can see all the different types that have been created by the system. So if we were to go into any one of these types, open that up in a separate tab here, we can scroll down and you can see that the participant numbers are actually stored in here, and we've got 1 and 99. And that's why whenever we timetable something, it's using those figures because the workshop type has these as the default numbers. But since we're in here now, we can change this to whatever we want. So we can put in a different maximum. We could also even change the minimum if we so wished. And that will become the new default going forward. You won't really need to change much else here. All these options aren't actually going to be looked at when you timetable. It does its own times and dates and what have you, and the prices are probably not going to be relevant either. So pretty much you'll only come here to really change the participant limit. I will also caution you against changing the workshop code. If you do that, it will sort of dissociate this workshop type from the timetabling. You'll want to leave this as is, really. The only reason to come here is to adjust these figures. Once you've made those changes, you can go ahead and hit submit, and that will apply that change there. So now that workshop type has been updated, ADM 502, you can see it's taken us back to where the timetable units are hidden and in the inactive. So as what I've done, you may wish to open these up in a list and then open each unit up in a separate tab so that you don't lose that original list. Now that we've changed this workshop type, what I'm going to do is return back to our class. Let's go to one of the ones we timetabled earlier. And we're just going to update that to look a bit closely. And if we scroll down, we can see we have ADM 502. It was timetabled. And if we go to the workshop that's part of that, we can see that this has remained the same. The reason that's the case is because that this was timetabled and then the workshop type was updated. Changing these types will only affect future timetabled workshops. The existing ones you have will not be affected by the changes in here. For them, you will need to go through and update that specific workshop and then change its numbers in here. Because of that limitation, what I would suggest doing if you do want to make use of these participant numbers and adjust them to real values is when you are setting up your classes, create your first class, fully timetable it through the process we initially showed in part 1 of our webinars. But before timetabling or setting up any others, immediately go to your workshop types and adjust all your default values. With that done, it means when you create your next class and timetable it to get ready for rolling enrollments, it will pull through all the correct participant numbers. So you only have to adjust those values manually once, but from then onwards, it will use the defaults you've put in here. And that's an excellent feature if you want to take track of your participant numbers. right.
Okay, and that wraps up today's webinar on part 2 of using aXcelerate's timetabling feature. Hopefully this gives you an idea of how the system can help you perform rolling enrollments effectively within your RTO. If you've popped any questions in the chat room, we'll be putting together responses and send those out very shortly. Now, this will be our last webinar for the year, but we will be returning in 2021. Our next series of webinars will in fact cover event reportings, and this will be split into 2 sessions as it can be quite a complex and hair-pulling area for most RTOs, especially since we are getting very close to reporting season. This is coming up at the end of January 2021, so do look out for these sessions. Thanks so much for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you in the new year. Bye! See ya!
See you guys.
So my name's Sam and I am the lead product designer here at aXcelerate. It's really relevant for anyone who is interested or has experience with e-learning and that sort of thing. So yeah, it should be pretty much, if you work at an RTO, you should be pretty familiar with the different types of e-learning and sort of how you create them and what you can include. So I think it's just, yeah, creating more options which are more in line with, you know, normal or purely e-learning based authoring tools. We also did it in a way where we really focused on making it work well on mobile devices as well. So that's been a focus of all the new question types as well, making sure they respond nicely on a small device. Yeah, so mark the regions, it's really about identifying homogeneous content within a particular image. So if you had to label both wheels on the bicycle, then that would be a good one for mark the regions.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah.
And what about label the regions?
Yep, so label the regions basically lets you create a region and give it a name.
Yeah.
And then the student will see the name as a label on their end, which then they have to place correctly in the region that you've created on the authoring side.
Cool.
The matching list is, yeah, basically about creating a list of either images or definitions and having the student choose correctly the term which matches up to either an image or, yeah, a definition provided.
Cool.
Yep, so ordering's a pretty simple one, but can be a really awesome tool to evaluate knowledge of different processes or orders that certain actions must be performed in. So you'll set up the list in the correct order, and the learner will then receive a jumbled version, which they'll have to rearrange into the correct order. Question 10 of your quiz is, upload this document which you needed to fill out, and we want to include that as part of this assessment, but we didn't want to give that particular upload like a whole assessment, which is what you had to do previously. Yeah, so the new content type, previously within assessments, every item that you included had to be accessible in some form. So content basically just removes that restriction and lets you add whatever you like in those steps in a HTML format, as you normally would in the editor. So videos, images, text, it doesn't really matter. When the student views that in the Learner portal, they'll just have to read it and then press next, rather than have to respond to it in any way.
Sweet.
My name's Julian Tetzworth, and I'm a user experience developer at aXcelerate.